Overnight, the most polite sport in the world tore itself apart.
The new LIV Golf series has launched with a tournament in London.
4 years ago, some of the PGA's top players defected to LIV Golf, seeking a sweeter payout.
It was a business decision, first and foremost.
Mickelson reportedly signed a deal worth $200 million.
The breakaway league truly fractured professional golf.
I disagree with it. They've turned their back on what has allowed them to get to this position.
LIV Golf's business model was predicated on the whims of one nation, Saudi Arabia.
In less than 5 years, the Saudis spent over $5 billion on LIV Golf.
It was meant to be the ultimate soft power flex.
But times have changed.
It's very expensive to run this league. And then you have a war happening in the Middle East.
Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund announced it will be pulling its funding at the end of the season.
That's left LIV looking for someone else to help foot the bill.
We're very fortunate that a lead investor signed a term sheet approved by our board.
So how did this glamorous scion of the country club scene suddenly find itself in the bunker? For a long time, professional golf looked like this.
And putting for birdie.
Then LIV showed up. Younger, faster, and more global.
LIV wanted to change the way the sport was perceived by moving away from the buttoned-up culture of the golf course and inject some glitz and that festival atmosphere.
The PGA Tour is the oldest aging demographic in sport. It's 67 and a half. We've pulled that 67 and a half down to 45.
Originally, LIV was not a 72-hole game.
LIV is the Roman numeral 54, the number of holes that the tournament used to play when it first started off in 2022.
Our inaugural event.
LIV subsequently has gone up to 72 holes.
The LIV Golf tournaments were all over the world, as opposed to the PGA Tour, which is primarily based in America. Another innovation was the team aspect. LIV has franchises in which there are a number of golfers that are on a single franchise and they compete as a team. Whereas with the PGA Tour, you're pretty much out there by yourself. Also, the prize pools were different.
LIV's first events offered $25 million in prize money, with $4 million going to the winner. For comparison, the winner of the 2022 Masters took home $2.7 million. And LIV had no cut, meaning the last place finisher walked away with $120,000. But LIV wasn't just offering more money on the course. It was paying some of golf's biggest stars huge sums simply to join.
The offers that LIV Golf made to golfers were extraordinary. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, $125 million, $130 million, and in Jon Rahm's case, $300 million, and that's life-changing money. Of course, when you play on the PGA Tour, when you win, you earn. Whereas with LIV Golf, this was a check just to join and compete. So a lot of golfers took this opportunity.
The PGA Tour was never going to take this lying down. They went ahead and handed out player bans, which was a big decision.
11 golfers are suing the PGA Tour for suspending them.
LIV could only make those offers because it had access to an enormous pool of capital.
PIF stands for Public Investment Fund, and it's Saudi Arabia's primary sovereign wealth fund, and it is chaired by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
These are the Middle East's largest wealth funds. PIF manages about $1 trillion. It's only topped by Abu Dhabi's Adia.
The Saudis have been trying to get into sports for a very long time. You look at their investment in boxing and in combat sports.
It was a time when the kingdom was using a variety of sports to push its political, cultural, and social investments in a bid to improve and expand its influence in the region and beyond.
The kingdom was seeking to change the subject after a major international incident.
And don't forget, it was also at a period when they were spending to the hilt on giga projects. Yes, LIV Golf was an expensive endeavor, but was a drop in the bucket compared to some of the other major investments being pursued by the Saudis at the time.
The business logic was straightforward. Spend big, sign stars, and get people to watch. But it didn't quite work that way.
LIV Golf had Fox Sports, and of course Fox Sports broadcast the NFL. But at the same time, they never garnered an audience quite like the PGA Tour, and you can attribute that to really the legacy of the PGA Tour. It's the exact same thing with the NFL or with the NBA. If a competitor league was to emerge, a good portion of audiences are going to go where they're familiar with. And I think LIV Golf in particular had big names, but it never attracted the audience.
Magnificent in Mexico City.
According to Sports Business Journal, LIV's final round in Mexico City in April averaged 49,000 U.S. viewers on Fox Sports 1. That same day, the PGA Tour's RBC Heritage Final Round averaged 4.35 million on CBS.
You can throw out all the money in the world, but if your fan base sees that the competitive drive is missing, then you're losing the key ingredient that in the first place draws fans to the sport.
For Saudi Arabia, the billions it was pouring into the league were becoming harder to justify.
Some of their mega projects weren't going as well, and other economic shocks meant that the league could not offer those blank checks forever. The project had to translate to commercial success, otherwise it was going to run into big trouble, and that's what we're seeing play out.
You can see interest waning in the Google searches in 2026. This is the PGA. Now look at LIV Golf. The lone spike in interest at the end of April wasn't for a tournament. It was from the breaking news of the Saudi private investment fund pullout.
The London Stock Exchange continues to shrink.
Uncover more at Bloomberg.com/videos.
LIV Golf is trying to chip back to the green, hoping to land a new lead investor amongst other strategies.
BC Partners is the lead investor for this deal, which may or may not happen because it's not a binding offer, meaning that there's still some negotiations to take place. We've been speaking to sources who have been looking at the financing, and they were a little bit skittish about putting money in because so much of the success of the league is going to depend on a heavy lift from the players. They're asking their players to take equity.
That is a big ask of players who have, a finite amount of time to make their hay as professional athletes.
You're taking a huge chance that the league is going to survive, right? Like if the league doesn't survive, a couple years from now, you could be left with holding nothing.
Some players had already started to jump ship, rejoining the PGA.
The PGA Tour played it smart by opening the door to return for some of the prime players, allowing the rebels to lay down their weapons and come back to the fold.
But not everyone in the PGA is rolling out the red carpet.
Do they bring value, in your opinion?
I mean, I'd argue, have they brought value to LIV?
Fans, however, just love the game. And there's hope the two leagues could strike a deal.
I don't see why they can't combine the leagues in some type of way.
I think that would be just good for the game of golf overall.
The PGA has shut the door on that idea, at least for now. But LIV Golf has been a driver of change.
Huge innovation usually doesn't happen without a crisis. I think we've had that moment here.
It forced the PGA Tour to acknowledge the deep-seated frustration that seemed to be building up and realize that some of the player demands had to be met. If that meant sharing more of the spoils with the players, their most important asset, then so be it. And you did see some prize events and some tournaments increase what they had on offer for the players and make sure that economic reasons were not going to be driving away most of their stars.